The night was quiet. The city lights were shining outside, but inside his small room everything was dark. He sat on the floor, his head down, his hands shaking. Once, his life was full of dreams, full of plans, full of laughter. But tonight, it felt empty. This is the story of a man who was once strong, once hopeful, once full of life. People knew him as someone who always smiled, someone who always helped others. He had a heart full of kindness and a future full of possibilities. But life does not always give what we expect. Sometimes, life takes away everything. His journey began with big dreams. He wanted success. He wanted love. He wanted respect. And for some time, he had it. He had friends who stood by him, a family who believed in him, and goals that gave him energy every single day. The mornings felt bright, and the nights felt peaceful. But slowly, everything began to change. It started with small failures. A missed opportunity here, a broken promise there. At first, he thought it was normal. Everyone faces difficulties. He told himself, this is temporary. I can handle it. But with time, the failures became bigger, the disappointments became heavier, and the people around him began to disappear. One by one, the faces he trusted turned away. Some betrayed him, some forgot him, and some simply chose to leave. His family, once proud, now spoke with doubt in their voice. His friends, once close, now laughed from a distance. And the person he loved the most was gone. He tried to stay strong. He tried to pretend nothing was wrong. He smiled when people looked at him, but deep inside, his soul was breaking. Every night, when he was alone, the silence shouted at him. The silence told him he was worthless, that his story was already over. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The man who once stood tall was now broken inside. He stopped meeting people. He stopped answering calls. He stopped believing in himself. His dreams felt like lies. His heart felt like a heavy stone. There were nights when he sat near the window, watching the stars, asking questions no one could answer. Why me? What did I do wrong? Why did life take everything away? But no answer came. Only more silence. Only more pain. His body was alive, but his spirit was dying. People outside saw him as just another man who failed. But no one saw the battle he was fighting inside. No one saw the storm that destroyed his heart every single day. He wanted to scream, but no voice came out. He wanted to run, but his feet felt heavy. He wanted to hope, but his hope was already lost. One evening, as the rain fell outside, he sat in his dark room. His eyes stared at the floor. His hands covered his face. The sound of the rain mixed with the sound of his tears. In that moment, he felt he had lost everything, his dreams, his love, his trust, and even himself. To the world, he was just another broken man. But inside, he knew something darker. He was not just broken, he was lost. Yet, deep in the silence of that painful night, something strange was happening. He did not know it yet, but his story was not ending. This pain, this suffering, this loneliness, was building something inside him. Something he could not see yet. His fall was not the end. It was the beginning. And while the world thought his life was finished, destiny was quietly preparing a new chapter. A chapter no one expected. A chapter that would transform this broken man into someone unshakable. But at that time, he did not know any of this. He only felt the weight of loss. He only felt the darkness around him. He only felt the emptiness inside his heart. The night grew colder, the rain grew heavier, and his tears refused to stop. This was the lowest point of his life. He thought he would never rise again. He thought this was the end of his journey. But life had other plans. Because sometimes, when everything breaks apart, that is when a new story begins. And his story, the story of being lost and broken, was just starting to take shape. He had no idea that this fall would lead him to something far greater than he ever imagined. The days after his fall were long and heavy. The sun still rose every morning, but for him, it brought no light. The nights were even worse. He would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence that felt louder than any noise. His mind was his enemy now. Every thought, every memory, every regret came back to attack him again and again. He stopped speaking to people. The phone rang, but he never answered. Messages arrived, but he never replied. The man who once laughed loudly now walked with his head down. Even when people asked, "Are you okay?" he only nodded with a weak smile. Nobody knew that inside, his world was collapsing. His house was no longer a home. It felt like a cage. The walls carried his secrets, the floor held his broken steps, and the windows showed him a world that was moving forward without him. Outside, people were smiling, working, and living. But inside his room, time had stopped. He tried to distract himself. Sometimes he turned on the TV, but he couldn't focus. Sometimes he opened a book, but the words didn't make sense. Sometimes he even went outside, but the laughter of others only reminded him of everything he had lost. At night, the darkness became his closest companion. He sat alone, whispering to himself, asking the same painful questions. Why did they leave me? Why am I not enough? Why does nothing ever work for me? No answer ever came, only silence, only more emptiness. Food lost its taste. Sleep lost its comfort. Life lost its meaning. He was breathing, but he wasn't living. He was surviving, but not alive. The darkness inside him was growing bigger and bigger every single day. One evening, he walked down the street, his hands in his pockets, his head low. People passed him, busy with their own lives. Some laughed with friends, some walked with family, and some held hands with someone they loved. He felt invisible. It was as if he didn't exist. The world was moving forward, and he was stuck in the same place. He whispered inside his heart, "Maybe this is who I am now, a broken man who will never rise again." But the darkness was not only outside. It was inside his mind too. Every failure replayed like a movie. Every betrayal echoed like a cruel voice. Every dream that died returned to remind him of his weakness. He started to believe the lies his mind told him. You are nothing. You will never change. You are all alone. The more he listened, the more he sank deeper into that dark place. Some nights, he sat by the window, looking at the empty streets. The moon shone brightly, but even that light could not reach his heart. He thought about the people who once stood beside him. Where were they now? Did they ever think about him? Or had they completely erased him from their lives? He wondered if the world would notice if he simply disappeared. Would anyone care? Or would life continue as if he had never existed? These questions haunted him, but somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark still refused to die. He did not see it yet, but it was there, waiting, hiding, preparing. Still, the darkness was strong. It pulled him down again and again. He stopped believing in tomorrow. For him, tomorrow was just another painful repeat of today. One night, when the pain was too heavy, he whispered to himself, "Maybe this is my destiny. Maybe I was not meant to shine. Maybe I was meant to stay in the shadows forever." But destiny had its own plan. The storm inside him was not the end. It was the test. A test that would either break him completely, or prepare him for something greater. At that moment, he did not know. At that moment, he only felt lost. He only felt broken. He only felt trapped in endless darkness. And yet, even the darkest nights cannot stop the morning from coming. The question was, would he survive long enough to see that light? The darkness had almost become his second skin. Days felt like years, and nights felt endless. Every breath was heavy, every step was slow. He had accepted that this was his life now, a life without meaning, a life without hope. But sometimes, the universe gives a small sign when we least expect it. A sign so small, it almost feels invisible, yet it has the power to change everything. One cold evening, he was walking down the street. His eyes were on the ground, his mind lost in painful thoughts. He did not notice the people around him. He did not notice the noise of traffic or the bright lights of the shops. Suddenly, he heard a voice. "Are you okay?" He looked up and saw an old man sitting on the corner of the street. The man's clothes were simple, his face wrinkled, but his eyes carried a strange kind of light. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. No one had asked him that question in a long time. He only nodded and tried to walk away. But the old man smiled gently and said, "You carry a heavy heart, don't you? But remember, even broken hearts can still beat. Those words stopped him. He didn't understand why, but something inside him shook. He had heard thousands of words in his life, but these few simple words felt different. They felt like a seed dropped into dry soil. That night, as he sat alone in his room, the words replayed in his mind, even broken hearts can still beat. He wondered, could it be true? Am I really finished, or is there still something left inside me? For the first time in months, he did not cry himself to sleep. Instead, he fell asleep thinking about those words. The next morning, nothing big had changed. His life was still the same. But there was a tiny spark in his heart, so small, it was almost invisible, but it was there. He woke up and whispered to himself, maybe my story is not over yet. Days passed, and the spark grew a little stronger. He started doing small things he had once stopped. He cleaned his room. He opened the window to let the sunlight in. He went outside for a short walk. These were not big victories, but for him, they were steps away from the darkness. Still, the battle inside his mind continued. His fears screamed at him. His past failures laughed at him. His loneliness tried to pull him back into the shadows. But now, for the first time, he was fighting back. He remembered the things he once loved. Music, reading, writing, little things that once gave him joy. He picked up a book again. At first, the words were hard to follow, but slowly, page by page, his mind began to focus. He wrote down his thoughts in a small notebook. They were not perfect, but they were real. Every day was still a struggle. Some mornings, he woke up strong. Other mornings, he felt weak again. But instead of giving up, he whispered to himself, one more step. Just one more step. One afternoon, he stood in front of the mirror. For the first time in months, he looked into his own eyes. They were tired, yes. They were filled with scars of pain, yes. But behind the tired eyes, he saw something else, a fire, small but alive. And in that moment, he realized something powerful, he was still here. He had lost so much, but he had not lost everything. He still had breath in his lungs. He still had strength in his body. He still had a chance. The old man's words echoed again, even broken hearts can still beat. That evening, he wrote a promise to himself in his notebook. I will not let this darkness define me. I will rise. Slowly, step by step, I will rise. It was not an easy promise. It was not a guarantee. But it was the beginning of a fight, his fight. Little did he know, this was the turning point of his life. The place where his story changed direction. He was no longer just a broken man. He was a fighter, even if the world didn't see it yet. He was standing at the edge of transformation, even if he could not see the full picture. The darkness was still around him, yes. But now, there was also a light inside him. A light that refused to die. And sometimes, one small light is enough to break even the darkest night. He did not know where the road would lead. He did not know how many battles were still waiting for him. But he knew one thing, his story was not finished. This was not the end. This was the beginning of a new chapter. The broken man was slowly learning to rise again. And the world was about to witness a transformation no one expected. The turning point had arrived, but it was only the beginning. He had promised himself that he would rise again. Yet promises are easy, and living them is hard. The real test started now. Every morning, he woke up and fought against his own mind. His thoughts still whispered lies, you can't do it. You will fail again. Why even try? But instead of giving up, he whispered back, one more step. Just one more step. He started small. At first, it was just waking up earlier, making his bed, and walking outside for 10 minutes. These actions seemed simple, almost meaningless. But for him, they were battles, and winning them gave him strength. The world did not see his struggle. No one noticed how hard it was for him to take even those small steps. But inside, he was fighting with everything he had. He decided to rebuild himself, not in one day, but piece by piece. He joined a local gym. The first day was painful. His body was weak, his muscles heavy, and his breath short. He felt embarrassed seeing others lifting heavy weights while he struggled with the lightest ones. For a moment, he thought about walking out. But then, the old man's words echoed again, even broken hearts can still beat. He stayed. He lifted, even if it was small. He sweated, even if it hurt. That day, he didn't win against the weights. He won against his own excuses. Days turned into weeks. His body was sore, but slowly it began to change. More than his body, his mind began to shift. He realized discipline was stronger than motivation. Motivation came and went, but discipline forced him to show up even when he didn't feel like it. Not every day was a victory. Some days he felt like quitting. Some days he fell back into sadness. Some nights he cried again, remembering his past. But each time he fell, he stood up again. He began reading books about strength, resilience, and hope. He filled his notebook with quotes and personal reflections. He started writing down his goals, small ones at first. Walk 2 kilometers. Read 10 pages a day. Avoid negative thoughts for 1 hour. Slowly, he started achieving them. With every goal completed, his confidence grew a little stronger. The people around him started noticing small changes. His shoulders looked more confident. His eyes carried a little fire. His voice sounded more alive. Some asked him, "What's different about you?" He only smiled, because they could never understand the silent battles he fought every day. But struggle is never smooth. Just when he thought he was moving forward, life tested him again. He failed at a project he had been working on. The rejection hit him hard. For a moment, he felt the darkness calling him back. The old voice whispered, "See? You are still the same. Nothing has changed." That night was difficult. He sat on his bed, holding his head, wondering if all his effort was useless. But then, he remembered something he had written in his notebook: fall 7 times, stand up 8. He realized failure was not the end. Failure was part of the process. This time, instead of breaking him, failure pushed him to work harder. He returned to the gym with more focus. He read with more discipline. He wrote in his notebook every single night. Slowly, his pain transformed into power. He also started helping others. When he saw a friend struggling, he shared a few words of encouragement. When a stranger needed help, he offered a hand. In helping others, he discovered something new, healing himself. The struggle was not just physical or mental. It was spiritual. He learned patience when results didn't come quickly. He learned humility when progress was slow. And he learned that strength was not about never falling, it was about rising every time you fall. Months passed. He was not yet at the top, but he was far from the broken man he used to be. His steps were firmer. His mind was clearer. His heart, though scarred, was stronger. One evening, as he looked into the mirror again, he saw a different man. Not the lost one, not the broken one, but a man in the middle of transformation. A man still fighting, still struggling, but moving forward. And he realized something powerful: the struggle itself was shaping him. Yes, the journey was painful. Yes, he faced setbacks. But every challenge was building a new version of him, stronger, wiser, and unshakable. The world had not seen his true rise yet. But it was coming. Because a man who learns to fight his own darkness becomes unstoppable when the light finally arrives. And his light was on the way. The struggle had been long and painful, but it was shaping him into someone new. He was not the same man who once sat in the dark, broken and lost. Slowly, quietly, he was rising. It started with small signs. His body was stronger now, his shoulders straighter. His eyes carried a spark that had been missing for so long. When he walked, his steps no longer dragged. They carried purpose. People around him began to notice. Friends who once ignored him looked again with surprise. Strangers greeted him with respect. Even his family, who had once doubted him, saw a change they couldn't deny. One morning, he walked past the same street where the old man had once spoken to him. He remembered those words, "Even broken hearts can still beat." And now, he felt the truth of those words in every heartbeat. His mornings had transformed. Instead of lying in bed, drowning in sadness, he woke up early. He exercised with focus. He read books that fed his mind. He wrote in his notebook, not about pain anymore, but about plans. Opportunities began to return. A small project came his way, and this time he gave it his all. He worked late nights, pushed himself harder, and when he finally succeeded, it was not just a win, it was proof. Proof that he was no longer a victim of his past. With each step forward, his confidence grew. Not the empty confidence that comes from pride, but the deep confidence that comes from surviving storms. He had faced darkness, and because of that, no challenge looked impossible anymore. He started meeting people again. Not as the weak man he once was, but as someone who carried lessons inside him. When he spoke, people listened. His words had weight, because they came from real pain and real struggle. Some even asked him, "How did you change? How did you rise after falling so far?" He only smiled and said, "By refusing to stay down." His rise was not about money or fame. It was about strength, about courage, about hope. But as his spirit grew, success also began to follow. Slowly, doors that were once closed began to open again. He started helping others who felt broken. He shared his story with those who had lost hope. He told them, "I was where you are now. I know the darkness. But if I can rise, so can you." His voice became a light for those still trapped in their own storms. People began to call him an inspiration. But he never let pride control him. He knew the journey was not easy. He knew the scars he carried inside. And that humility made him even stronger. One evening, he stood on a rooftop, looking at the city lights. Months ago, those lights reminded him of his loneliness. But now, they reminded him of possibility. Every light in the distance felt like a dream waiting to be achieved. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive. But even in his rise, challenges remained. There were still failures, still moments of doubt. Yet this time, he did not break. When life pushed him down, he pushed back harder. He had learned something powerful: strength is not built in comfort. Strength is built in the fire of struggle. And he had been through the fire. The man who was once invisible now stood tall. The world that once doubted him now respected him. And yet, he knew his journey was not finished. He was rising, yes, but the true transformation was still ahead. As he walked down the same roads where he once felt invisible, people now turned to look. Not because of his clothes or his wealth, but because of the energy he carried. An energy of survival, of growth, of power. He had become living proof that a broken man can rise. That darkness does not last forever. That pain can transform into strength. But destiny was not done with him yet. The world had still not seen the full power of his rise. Because his greatest transformation was still to come. The rise was powerful, but it was not the end. It was only the beginning of something greater. The man who was once lost and broken was now standing taller, stronger, and more focused than ever. But true transformation is not about looking different. True transformation is about becoming someone new inside. He had already rebuilt his body and his mind. But his spirit was about to evolve into something extraordinary. One morning, as the sun rose, he stood outside watching the golden light touch the sky. Months ago, the same sunrise felt meaningless. But now, it felt like a message. A reminder that no night lasts forever. Every dark hour eventually gives way to light. He whispered to himself, "This is my new beginning." From that day, he lived with a new purpose. He no longer woke up just to survive. He woke up to grow, to inspire, to create. Every action he took carried intention. Every word he spoke carried hope. Every step he walked carried courage. His past no longer controlled him. The pain that once crushed him had now become his teacher. The betrayals had taught him the value of trust. The failures had taught him the meaning of resilience. And the loneliness had taught him how to stand strong even when no one was beside him. People began to see him differently. To some, he was a mentor. To others, he was an example. To everyone who met him, he was proof that brokenness does not mean the end. He started sharing his story openly. At first, to small groups, a few friends, a community gathering, a young person who had lost hope. His words were simple, but they carried truth. And truth always touches the heart. Life broke me once, he said, but it did not destroy me. It shaped me. And if I can stand again, so can you. His story spread. More and more people wanted to listen. Soon, he was speaking on bigger stages, to larger crowds. People cried hearing his journey. People stood up and clapped, not just for him, but for the hope he gave them. The man who was once invisible was now a light. The man who once begged for answers was now answering others. But his transformation was not about fame or applause. It was about responsibility. He knew what it felt like to be lost in darkness, and he could never forget it. That memory became his fuel to keep helping, to keep inspiring, to keep lifting others out of their own pain. He also rebuilt his personal life. His family, once doubtful, now looked at him with pride. Old friends returned, but this time, he chose carefully who to let in. He no longer chased people. He no longer begged for love. He had learned that true strength means standing alone when necessary, and welcoming only those who bring light. He became a man of discipline. He trained his body daily, not for vanity, but to honor his second chance at life. He trained his mind with books and learning. And he trained his spirit with kindness and patience. And then, something beautiful happened. The same city that once made him feel small now respected him. The same streets where he once walked invisibly now echoed with people greeting him. The same broken heart that once felt empty now carried love, not just for one person, but for life itself. He was no longer the broken man. He was the transformed man. Yet he never forgot where he came from. He remembered the nights of tears, the silence of loneliness, the voices of doubt. And each time he remembered, he grew even more grateful. Because without the fall, there would be no rise. Without the darkness, there would be no transformation. One evening, he returned to the same street corner where he had first met the old man. To his surprise, the old man was there again, sitting quietly. The man walked up to him and smiled. "You were right," he said. "Broken hearts can still beat. And sometimes, they beat stronger than ever." The old man looked into his eyes and nodded. "I knew it. The world needed your story. Now go, share it, and never forget, you are living proof that pain is not the end." As he walked away, his heart was full. He knew his journey would continue. There would still be challenges, still be struggles. But he was no longer afraid. He was no longer lost. He was no longer broken. He had transformed. And now, he carried a new mission, to help others find their own light, to remind them that no matter how deep the darkness, no matter how heavy the pain, no matter how broken the heart, there is always a way to rise again. Because his life was no longer just his own. His life was now a message. The message was simple, but powerful. From lost and broken, to found and inspirational. And that message would echo forever.